Silent Observatory. Kalen Mercer pressed his forehead against the cool glass of Horizon 7's main observatory dome, watching the distant star cluster that had been his obsession for the past 3 years. The research station floated in the void between inhabited systems, perfectly positioned to study the Cygnus Nebula's unpredictable energy patterns. Most crew members considered assignment to Horizon 7 a punishment. Too far from civilization, too quiet, too lonely. For Kalen, the isolation was precisely why he'd requested the posting. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured to himself, adjusting the calibration on the quantum imaging array. "Almost close enough to touch." On my world, we believed stars were the souls of ancestors. When one flared brightly, it meant someone important had passed into the celestial realm. Kalen turned, startled. Standing in the doorway was the station's newest resident, the refugee princess everyone had been whispering about for weeks. Her skin was a soft lavender that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim lighting, with deeper purple markings tracing elegant patterns along her temples and down her neck. Her eyes were large and luminous, with irises the color of twilight. "Princess Luria," Kalen said, straightening up and suddenly aware of his rumpled uniform. "I didn't realize anyone else was cleared for this section." She stepped forward, her movements graceful despite the gravity adjustments that made most visitors stumble. "Commander Ellis granted me access after I explained my interest in stellar cartography. My people were navigators before—" She paused, a shadow crossing her features. "Before the anomaly." Kalen nodded, understanding the weight of what remained unsaid. Everyone on the station knew of Nyx's fate, a peaceful world consumed by a cosmic event that scientists still couldn't properly explain. The survivors had scattered across the galaxy, seeking asylum where they could. Princess Luria was among the highest-ranking refugees, which made her both a diplomatic asset and a political complication. "I'm Kalen Mercer, lead astronomer." He gestured toward the starfield. "Would you like to see what I'm working on?" Her expression brightened slightly. "I would be honored." As he explained his research into energy wave patterns, Kalen couldn't help noticing how quickly she grasped complex concepts, occasionally asking questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of astrophysics. They fell into an easy rhythm, with Kalen adjusting the observatory's controls while Luria pointed out connections he hadn't considered. "This energy signature," she said, pointing to a fluctuating pattern on the display. "It resembles the resonance frequencies my people used for deep space communication." Before Kalen could respond, the station's alarm system blared to life. Red emergency lights bathed the observatory in crimson, as Commander Ellis's voice echoed through the communication system. "Attention, all personnel. Solar flare detected approaching from the Cygnus cluster, level 4 intensity. All non-essential systems will power down in 60 seconds. Proceed to designated safety zones immediately." Kalen moved quickly to secure his research data. "We need to get to the central hub. The observatory dome isn't shielded enough for—" A tremendous wave of energy washed over the station, causing the lights to flicker and die. The emergency bulkhead slammed shut with a decisive thud, sealing them inside the observatory. "That wasn't supposed to happen," Kalen said, trying the communication panel. "Dead. The flare must have hit us before the automated systems could fully engage." Luria moved to the window, watching as waves of energy rippled across the station's exterior shields. "How long will we be trapped?" "The standard protocol for a level 4 event is 12 hours of lockdown," Kalen replied, settling onto one of the observation benches. "Looks like we're going to get better acquainted, Princess." She turned toward him, her expression unreadable in the dim glow of the emergency lights and the dancing colors of the solar storm outside. "Perhaps the stars arranged it this way," she said softly, taking a seat nearby. Little did either of them know that this chance encounter, orchestrated by cosmic forces beyond their control, would set in motion events that would change not only their lives, but the relationship between their species forever. Whispers between worlds. Hours passed as the solar flare continued to rage outside Horizon 7. The emergency lighting in the observatory had stabilized,
casting everything in a soft blue glow that complemented the cosmic light show beyond the dome. Kalen had managed to activate the backup life support systems, ensuring they had heat and breathable air, but communications remained down. "Your Commander Ellis doesn't trust my people," Luria said suddenly, breaking a comfortable silence that had stretched between them. She sat cross-legged on the observatory bench, her posture perfect despite hours of confinement. Kalen looked up from the maintenance panel he'd been tinkering with. "What makes you say that?" "I don't need telepathy to read hostility, Kalen." A small smile touched her lips. "Though I do possess it." He paused, setting down his tools. The rumors about the Nixians' abilities had circulated through the station since their arrival, but this was the first confirmation he'd heard. "Can you," he began hesitantly, "read my thoughts?" Luria finished for him. "Not without permission and physical contact. My people consider uninvited mental connection as reprehensible as you would consider assault." She tilted her head, studying him. "Does that frighten you?" "Honestly, a little," Kalen admitted, "but mostly I'm curious. My work has always been about understanding the unknown." The princess nodded, her luminous eyes reflecting the stars outside. "On Nyx, we believed understanding begins with vulnerability." She held out her hand, palm up. "Would you like to see my world as it was, before the darkness came?" Kalen hesitated only briefly, before placing his palm against hers. Her skin was cooler than a human's, with a subtle texture like fine silk. For a moment, nothing happened. Then images flooded his mind. Soaring crystal spires that captured in refracted sunlight into prismatic patterns across city streets. Gardens where plants responded to emotional energies, blooming in synchronicity with joy and folding inward during moments of collective sorrow. The Royal Observatory, where Luria had spent her childhood, learning to navigate by the positions of distant suns. And then darkness, a creeping void that consumed everything it touched. Panic, evacuation. The weight of a crown passed to unprepared hands as her parents stayed behind to coordinate the final rescue ships. Kalen gasped as the connection broke, finding his cheeks wet with tears that weren't entirely his own. "That's the burden I carry. The memories of a dead world and the responsibility for its surviving children." "I'm sorry," he said, knowing the words were inadequate. "Don't be. You're the first human who's truly wanted to understand." She smiled, the gesture transforming her face. "Your thoughts are colorful, full of questions and wonder. Most humans I've encountered think in rigid patterns." "Occupational hazard of staring at stars too long," Kalen replied with a smile of his own. "Everything becomes a pattern to analyze." Their conversation flowed more freely after that, with Luria explaining Nixian customs and beliefs while Kalen shared stories of Earth and human expansion through the galaxy. When exhaustion finally caught up with them, they arranged emergency blankets into makeshift beds on opposite sides of the observatory. "Kalen," Luria's voice came through the darkness as the station's night cycle dimmed the emergency lights further. Thank you for sharing your sanctuary with me." He smiled into the darkness. "Anytime, Princess." When Kalen awoke, he found Luria standing at the dome's edge, her silhouette outlined by the stars. The solar flare had passed, leaving the void peaceful once more. "The lockdown should lift soon," he said, joining her. "And we return to our separate worlds within this small station," she replied, her voice carrying a note of resignation. The observatory doors hissed open before Kalen could respond. Commander Ellis stood in the doorway, flanked by security personnel. His gaze shifted between them, cold and assessing. "Dr. Mercer." "Princess, I see you weathered the isolation well enough." "Yes, sir," Kalen responded, straightening to attention. "All observatory equipment is intact." Ellis nodded curtly. "Princess, the Nixian delegation has been requesting your presence since communications were restored. They're quite insistent." Luria inclined her head gracefully. "Of course, Commander. I'll attend to them immediately." She turned to Kalen, her public persona sliding into place like armor. "Thank you for your hospitality, Dr. Mercer." As she left with Ellis, she brushed past Kalen, her fingers briefly touching his. A whisper entered his mind. Tonight, Southern Observation Deck, when the station clock strikes midnight.
Resonance. The Southern Observation Deck was Horizon 7's worst-kept secret. Officially decommissioned due to a minor radiation leak, but actually perfectly safe, and therefore the unofficial retreat for crew members seeking privacy. When Kalen arrived at midnight, Luria was already there, gazing out at the stars. "I was beginning to think you hadn't received my invitation," she said without turning. "Your security detail was particularly vigilant tonight," Kalen replied, moving to stand beside her. "I had to wait for a shift change." Now she turned, amusement dancing in her eyes. The brave astronomer, sneaking through his own station. "Worth it," he said simply. Their meetings became a nightly ritual over the following weeks. Sometimes they talked for hours about their worlds and lives. Other times they worked together, with Lyria's intuitive understanding of cosmic energy patterns complementing Kalen's methodical approach. During the station's day cycle, they maintained a professional distance, aware of Commander Ellis's growing suspicion of their friendship. "Your commander has requested Nixian telepathic technology 3 times this week," Lyria mentioned one night as they shared a meal of synthesized fruit and station rations. "He seems particularly interested in long-range communication applications." Kalen frowned. "That's odd. Our quantum relay system already outperforms most known technologies for that purpose." "Indeed." Lyria placed her hand over his. "I fear his interest lies not in communication, but in surveillance." Before Kalen could respond, the station's emergency alert sounded, not the blaring alarm of the solar flare, but a pulsing tone indicating internal security breach. The observation deck's communication panel lit up with Chief Engineer Tering's face. "Mercer, thank God you're there. We've got sabotage in the main reactor core. Someone's overriding the coolant systems. We need your access codes to lock it down remotely." Kalen rushed to the panel, Lyria close behind. "What's happening, Vehan?" "No time. The reactor's heading for critical. Your codes, now!" Something in the engineer's tone sent a warning signal through Kalen's mind. He glanced at Lyria, who subtly shook her head. "Let me come down there," Kalen said, carefully. "The manual override would be more reliable." Tering's expression hardened. "We don't have time for that. Your codes, Doctor, now!" Lyria stepped forward, placing her hand on the panel beside Kalen's. Her purple skin began to glow faintly as she closed her eyes. "He's lying," she whispered. "There's no reactor breach, but there is danger." Kalen's heart raced. "Vehan, I'm on my way. Give me 5 minutes." The engineer's image disappeared as Kalen cut the connection. "What's happening?" he asked Lyria. "Someone is attempting to access the station's secure systems using forged credentials. When I touched the panel, I could sense the deception in the signal itself." "We need to alert security." "No," Lyria said sharply. "I sensed Commander Ellis's mental signature in that transmission. He's involved." Kalen stared at her in disbelief. "The commander? That's impossible." "Not if he's been compromised." Lyria's expression was grim. "There are forces in this sector that would pay handsomely for Nixian telepathic technology, particularly its military applications." Understanding dawned on Kalen. "And you're the highest-ranking Nixian within reach?" They moved quickly through the station's maintenance tunnels, avoiding security checkpoints and cameras. Kalen's knowledge of the station's layout, combined with Lyria's ability to sense nearby presences, kept them one step ahead of pursuit. When they reached the central computer core, they found 2 security officers unconscious and Chief Engineer Tering working frantically at the main console. "Step away from the controls, Vehan," Kalen called out, grabbing a maintenance tool for protection. Tering spun, his face contorted with stress. "Kalen, thank God someone's using my credentials to access the Nixian diplomatic files. I can't lock them out." Lyria stepped forward cautiously. "Let me help."
The engineer's eyes widened at the sight of her. "Princess, you shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "I believe I am exactly where I need to be," she replied, approaching the console. "May I?" Tarian hesitated, then stepped aside. As Lyria placed her hands on the interface, her markings began to glow brightly. The computer screens flickered, then stabilized, with new information. "There," she said. "I've isolated the intrusion. It's coming from the commander's private quarters." Kalen and Tarian exchanged shocked glances. "The commander has been acting strangely since the diplomatic summit on Arctura Station," Tarian admitted. "More secretive, issuing unusual orders." "Not the commander," Lyria said softly. "Something using his identity." Hours later, after security had contained the situation and discovered the neural parasite controlling Alice, Kalen and Lyria found themselves alone in his quarters. The adrenaline of the crisis had faded, leaving them in a quiet moment of shared relief and unspoken tension. "You saved the station," Kalen said, sitting beside her on the small couch. "And probably the commander's life." Lyria shook her head. "We did it together." She looked up at him, vulnerability clear in her eyes. "I've never met anyone like you, Kalen. Someone who sees me, not just a refugee princess or a telepathic curiosity." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I see you, Lyria." When their lips met, it felt like stars colliding, warm and inevitable. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer as her hands traced the contours of his face, memorizing him by touch. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness dissolving in the heat between them. "Stay with me tonight," Kalen whispered against her lips. Her answer was to pull him closer, their bodies finding a rhythm as ancient as the stars themselves. Shattered orbit. Morning arrived with the soft chime of Kalen's alarm rousing him from the most peaceful sleep he had experienced in years. He reached across the bed, finding only empty space where Lyria had been. For a moment, he wondered if he had dreamed their night together, until he spotted the note on his bedside console. "Called to emergency council meeting. Last night was beautiful. L." Kalen smiled, tracing his finger over the elegant script. Their connection had deepened into something he couldn't have imagined when they first met in the observatory. Each moment with Lyria felt like discovering a new star, brilliant, unexpected, and precious. His communicator beeped with an incoming message from Acting Commander Harlow requesting his immediate presence in the central conference room. With Commander Ellis in medical isolation recovering from the neural parasite, Harlow had assumed temporary control of Horizon 7. When Kalen entered the conference room, the tension was immediately palpable. Around the large table sat Harlow, Chief Medical Officer Lynn, Security Chief Rodriguez, and 3 Nixian delegates he recognized as Lyria's advisors. Lyria herself sat at the far end, her expression carefully neutral, the face of a princess, not the woman who had shared his bed hours earlier. "Dr. Mercer," Harlow began without preamble, "thank you for joining us. We're discussing the security breach and the implications for station protocol." One of the Nixian delegates, Elder Tovan, a gray-skinned male with elaborate markings denoting his high status, leaned forward. "What the acting commander means is that we're discussing the inappropriate relationship between a human scientist and the last royal heir of Nyx." Kalen felt his heart sink. "I don't see how my personal relationships are relevant to station security." "They become relevant," Rodriguez cut in, "when they involve unauthorized sharing of classified information and potential compromising of diplomatic neutrality." Lyria's eyes flashed. "I shared nothing that endangered either your station or my people. In fact, our inappropriate relationship saved Horizon 7 from sabotage." "Which we appreciate," Harlow said diplomatically. "However, there are protocols. Protocols designed to keep us separate, Lyria interrupted, to maintain the fiction that Nixians are merely refugees to be managed rather than allies to be embraced. Elder Tovan's expression hardened. Princess Lyria, need I remind you of your position? The surviving houses look to you for leadership, not human entanglements. The meeting deteriorated from there, with accusations and regulations cited from both sides. Kalen found himself defending not only his relationship with Lyria, but her actions during the security breach, actions that had saved the station. Finally, Harlow raised her hand for silence. Enough. The facts remain. Protocols were broken, security was breached, and difficult decisions must be made. She turned to Lyria. Princess, the Galactic Council has approved the establishment of a permanent Nixian settlement on Proxima Colony. Your people's transports will depart in 3 days. 3 days? Kalen couldn't keep the
Celestial Union. 6 months passed like a slow-motion freefall. Kalen threw himself into his work, analyzing the data he and Lyria had gathered together, searching for patterns that might offer a solution to their separation. The crystal pendant never left his neck, its gentle glow a constant reminder of her promise. Commander Ellis, fully recovered and reinstated, watched Kalen's increasing obsession with concern. "You're one of my best scientists, Mercer," he said during a performance review, "but you're wasting your talents on this personal project." "With respect, sir, it's not just personal," Kalen replied, pushing forward a data tablet. "The telepathic resonance patterns we documented could revolutionize our communication systems." Ellis studied the information, his expression shifting from skepticism to interest. "And you believe this could work across interstellar distances?" In theory, Kalen highlighted a series of equations. The Nixians use a form of quantum entanglement enhanced by their natural telepathic abilities. If we could adapt our technology to mimic those patterns, you'd create a communication bridge that doesn't rely on traditional relays. Ellis finished, looking up with newfound respect. "How soon could you have a working prototype?" Kalen's heart raced. "With proper resources, 3 months." What he didn't say was that his research had a dual purpose, one scientific, one deeply personal. If he could establish this communication bridge, he might find a way back to Lyria. On Proxima Colony, Lyria stood on the balcony of the newly constructed Nixian Council chamber, watching 3 moons rise over the settlement. The colony had progressed rapidly, with crystalline structures reminiscent of their homeland rising from the fertile valley. Her people were adapting, healing, finding purpose in building this new home. Yet her own heart remained divided, part of it left behind on a distant space station with a human astronomer whose mind had touched hers like no other. "Your Highness," Elder Tovan approached with a formal bow, "the Galactic Council representatives have arrived for tomorrow's treaty negotiations." Lyria nodded. "Has there been any response to our proposal for expanded human scientific exchange?" Tovan's expression softened slightly. "Not yet, Princess, but the Council seems receptive to strengthening ties between our peoples." "Good." Lyria touched the space over her heart where her own crystal, twin to the one she'd given Kalen, hung beneath her robes. Its steady pulse had been her comfort during lonely nights. "Ensure that our proposal for a joint research facility receives priority in the discussions." As Tovan departed, Lyria closed her eyes, focusing on the faint telepathic connection that stretched across space like a gossamer thread. "I haven't forgotten, Kalen. I'm finding a way." The breakthrough came on a quiet station night, 3 weeks before Kalen's promised prototype deadline. He was alone in the lab, running final simulations on the quantum resonance array when the crystal pendant suddenly flared with brilliant light. At the same time, the communication array activated itself, displaying a cascade of energy patterns that matched Lyria's unique telepathic signature. "Impossible," Kalen whispered, fingers flying over the controls to stabilize the connection. The holographic display flickered, then resolved into a familiar face. "Kalen," Lyria's voice came through. distorted but recognizable. "Can you hear me?" "Lyria," he laughed in disbelief. "How are you doing this? The array isn't even fully calibrated yet." Her image smiled. "I'm using the Council's new quantum observatory. We've been working on similar technology from our end." Her expression grew serious. "Kalen, listen carefully. The Galactic Council is meeting tomorrow to finalize a treaty between humans and Nixians. I've proposed a joint scientific initiative, a bridge between our peoples." "And you need the research resonance?" Kalen realized. "I need more than research." Her eyes held his across impossible distance. "I need you as the human representative for the initiative."